So you know the most popular ones. So distributive, commutative, associative. You also know other ones. You might just have never called them anything specific. So if we look at this first set of pair of equations, 3 plus 5 equals 8, and then 3 plus 5 minus 5 equals 8 minus 5. So I want you to see what happened to change that first equation into the second equation. What did they do to both sides of that equal sign to change that first equation into the second one? What's different? I'm going to highlight it in a second, but what operation did they use to change the first one equation into the second one? They did do the inverse, which in this case, the inverse was this minus 5, right? They subtracted 5 on both sides. That actually has a fancy name. And when we subtract the same thing on both sides, it's called the subtraction property of equality. The reason why it's called a property of equality is because I'm doing it on both sides of an equal sign. So that property of equality is important. Don't just say subtraction. You're calling it the subtraction property of equality for a reason. So if we look at the second one, I started with x minus 3 equals 7. My second equation says x minus 3 plus 3 equals 7 plus 3. So you'll notice that they added 3 on both sides. So what do you think that one's called? Yeah, addition. You're so smart. Addition property. Don't be lazy, write the whole thing. Of equality. The third one, we started with 2 times 4 equals 8. And we ended with 2 times 4 divided by 2 equals 8 divided by 2. So what do you think that property is called? The division property of equality. Division. And the last one, I hope by process of elimination, you could assume that the last one is probably going to be what? The multiplication property of equality. And you can see that they multiplied by 2 on both sides of that equal sign. So that would be the multiplication property of equality. Again, you've done this before. You just didn't know that it had a fancy name like that. So when we solve equations, we want to know exactly what we are using to solve. And that's what we're doing. We're most of the time either going to be using substitute or subtraction, addition, division, multiplication. Occasionally we'll use the distributive property or sometimes the commutative property. Those might come into play as well. So let's look at a few examples. So I want you to go to the let's practice. We're going to look at those 3 examples. So again, we're just determining, we're not solving. I'm going to say it a million times, not solving anything. All we're identifying is what property was used to change the first equation into the second one. So kind of like spotting the difference sort of thing. So on letter A, what happened on both sides of that equal sign? Which property was used to change that first equation to the second one? Yeah, Connor. Addition. Yeah, it looks like they added 5 on both sides of that equal sign. So we're going to call that the addition property of equality. So look at the second one. What changed that first equation into the second one? What happened on both sides that equal sign? Yeah, Brianna. Subtraction. Okay, what did they subtract? 3's. Yeah, 3x, yeah. you'll see that there's a minus 3x now on both sides of that equal sign. So we're going to call that the subtraction property of equality. And then letter C, we started with negative 2x equals 12, and now we have negative 2x divided by negative 2 equals 12 divided by negative 2. So what happened? Division, specifically divided by negative 2, and that would be the division property of equality. Good. Okay, before you do the try it, keep in mind that you could also use the distributive property and the commutative property. It's not limited to the 4 add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So go ahead and do the A through E on the try it and let me know when you're done so I can come check your answers. Digital students, send me your answers to those when you're done, but if you want to abbreviate so you don't have to type so much, that's fine too. But go ahead and work on that A through E and identifying the property. Okay, so again, you want to make sure that you're looking at what happened to go from the first equation to the second one. So on letter A, we had a really big debate in my third period yesterday about letter A because some people said multiplication property of equality. It is distributive property. And the reason why is distributive property only happens on one side of the equal sign. The multiplication property is going to be happening on both sides of the equal sign. So you can see that the 2 is only being distributed on the left-hand side of that equal sign and nothing happened to the right. So that's why we want to call it the distributive property and not multiplication property. Letter B, they added 6x to both sides. So that would be the addition property. And I'm taking after Kevin. I'm going to be lazy over here and just write prop of equal. So if you want to do that too. Kevin did APOE. So if you want to be super lazy, I'll accept that. As long as you tell me the difference. I need to know the difference between division and distributive because those both start with a D. So you at least need to like make it known which one of those is which. Letter C was the commutative property. The 6x and the 8 switched places. So that was the commutative property. Letter D, they subtracted 8 from both sides. So that would be the subtraction property of equality. And then E, they multiplied by 1/8. So that would be the multiplication property of equality. All right, so we're going to look at the beat the test. Before we start it though, on the beat the test, we're going to be answering what operation would we be doing to solve this problem, not what is happening in the problem. We want to know if I were to solve that, what operation would I use? So for the first one, x divided by 2 equals 5. What operation would we be using to solve? Multiplication. I see division. Again, this is why I want to make sure that we're realizing. I see division. I'm going to use multiplication to solve, and that's the second checkbox. Unfortunately, I wish it was separated. It does say addition and subtraction together in the same checkbox and multiplication and division together. I wish they were separated, but it is what it is. So the second one, 2x plus 7 equals 13. So the two things I would do to solve would be subtraction, because I want to do the opposite, and division, because I want to do the opposite. So that would be the first checkbox and the second one. The third question, 4x equals 23. I see it multiplication. If I were to solve, I would actually use division. Fourth one, x minus 3 equals -4. I see subtraction, so I would use addition to solve. The next one, 4 times x plus 5 equals 40. The first thing I would do would be use the distributive property. And then I see addition, so I would do subtraction, and I'm also going to end up using the division property of equality. So you could be using 3 different things. 10 plus x equals 79. I would be using the subtraction property. Negative 8 minus x equals 19. We would be using the addition property and the division property, because that x has a coefficient that's not 1. What is the coefficient right now of that x? It's -1. So eventually we'd have to divide by -1. So we'd be using the division property of equality there. And then the last one, you're going to use every single property. We're going to use the commutative property because eventually we're going to combine like terms. And when you combine like terms, technically you are using the commutative property.